Larry, very good to see you. Today, we're going to talk through the 6 questions that you should ask your advisor before you retire. Now, of course, you do not need a relationship with an advisor before you retire, but we do recommend you at least make an appointment with one to talk through these questions. And the first question to ask: am I financially ready to retire? This one seems the most obvious.
It's one of my favorite, Aaron, is that, that's what most of us think about when we're looking at retirement is planning
Yeah.
that, saving that amount of money. How much does it take for me to retire? But that's just a piece of it. We can always crunch the numbers. But what I find a lot of times, it's the emotional part of retirement as well. What are you going to do when you retire? I mean, every day is Saturday. So we have to look at the monies, but two, what are you going to do? So I enjoy that part, that it's a lot of the emotional conversation as well as it is the financial part of it.
Yeah, really good point. You want to have something to retire to. I hear that all the time. The second question to ask: what income sources will I rely on in retirement and how sustainable are they?
Everyone understands Social Security. And of course, there's a lot of conversation about us running out of money, having only 78% of that in 2034. I personally always believe that that's going to be fixed before then, but you don't know, so you do have to plan around that. But Social Security, some folks have hopefully got the 401k, the IRAs, those kind of things, or non-qualified monies, just brokerage accounts, pensions if you're lucky, I guess. And I always say that with tongue in cheek because sometimes that creates even more of a tax burden on trying to move monies around. But there's a lot of those products that we can have, but it's really important of how do you position them. That's going to be really important about being
Mhm.
sustainable.
Right. Well said. And that leads us perfectly to our next question, which is: how can I minimize taxes on my retirement income? These are all related questions, really.
They are. And, with that, again, we always talk about, any kind of tax planning. If you can meet with an advisor 3 to 5 years before you retire, as you
Right.
see from this structure right here, I mean, you can have the tax free. If you had $1 million in a tax free bucket or a tax deferred bucket, huge difference. So,
Right.
with that, again, it's really about making sure you meet with that advisor 3 to 5 years before retiring, create that tax plan.
Right. Really important. Next question: what, if any, adjustments should I make to my investment portfolio?
Another fun one for me. I've been doing this almost 20 years, Aaron. And, I call it's not your father's retirement. It used to be a 60% stock, 40% bond
Right.
portfolio, and things generally worked out okay. Now we use things called bucket segmentation to where we want to make sure, as you see on the picture here, your first 3 to 5 years needs to be in a bucket that is pretty liquid and is pretty safe. If we do that and we have the income bucket and a growth bucket, we can kind of let if we want it to be growth, we need to have it in a bucket that we can sustain some volatility like we've seen a little bit lately. That we know if we created the plan, we don't have any issue that we've got things coming out at the right time.
hmm The next question: do I have enough saved to account for inflation and other unexpected expenses?
A lot of people underestimate this as well. Is they look at it and they think, "Hey, I need $6,000 a month to retire on. I could be comfortable." And 3 years later, they're under, "Why am I not making it? I'm still got the same 6,000." But they don't equate for the inflation. Social Security gives you a little bit of that cost of living adjustment. But we create a plan for that. That's the important part. Create a plan that in 10 years, that 6,000 might be 9,000. It's not getting a
Right.
raise. It's just keeping up with the cost of inflation. So just
Mhm.
create that in your plan, and that's something we do for our people.
And the last question: do I have a plan for long term care? And the reason why that's so important, as you know, Larry, is that 7 out of 10 people will need long term care at some point in their life. And when we take a look at the cost of long term care projected out to 2043, annually, it's going to cost you $124,000 up to $211,000. So if you don't have a plan for that, that could wipe out your savings.
It's amazing. And, that's something I struggled with early in my career is that I would mention this to clients and no one wants to pay for long-term care because they're afraid they're going to use they don't want to use it. Right. But
Yeah.
that's something that I have some of my longer tenure clients now say, "Hey, you talked about this. We wish we'd have listened a little bit more because it can destroy a portfolio." Now, there are other alternatives. There's long-term care that can be expensive. There's other alternatives you can use with the Roth life insurance for the chronic illness riders. It's just all about getting back to planning with the resources that you have to make sure that you can put a safety net beneath your feet for that.
Mm. Larry, I always enjoy talking to you, but when we get a chance to talk through these questions, it makes it apparent that you need an advisor who can touch on all these points. Otherwise, we might not have the retirement that we've wanted and certainly deserve. So if somebody wants to have this conversation with you, how can they reach you?
They can call our office. That phone number is 615-216-1048, or they can go on our website at sfawealth.com.
Great. Larry, thank you.
Thank you, Aaron.